Today we're going to be taking a look at the Lionscool Power Rack Cable Combo. This was provided to me by Lionscool in exchange for my review, but as you know, if you have watched previous reviews in the past, that will not affect my opinions in any way. You can expect my honest thoughts. Let's hop right into it. First of all, let's talk about the dimensions. The width of the rack from outside of the upright to the outside of the upright is about 49.5 inches. But if you're wondering the width from the perspective of will this fit in a certain location, do keep in mind that the width of the rack isn't the dimension that you actually need to know. What you need to know is the length of a barbell, which is approximately 7 foot, depending on what barbell you're using. So you're gonna need about 8 foot of space minimum to be able to accommodate the rack, because you need to be able to fit the bar and then have a little bit of wiggle room for the bar and actually have space to be able to load plates on the end of the bar. So keep that in mind. The rack is 86.5 inches tall, it appears. And the pulley is actually the tallest point, and it's just shy of 88 inches. So it's a little taller than 7 foot. So it should fit in just about at least most rooms. And the depth of the rack is 56 inches, but keep in mind that you do actually need a little bit more room than that because you need some tolerance to be able to put plates on the trolley. So you need about 8 inches of tolerance to be able to actually put a 45-pound plate on your trolley. This is a 2x2 rack, kind of. It's not a true 2x2 rack. It's actually a 6 centimeter by 6 centimeter upright, so it's like 2.5 inches. That's something you should keep in mind if you ever plan to add accessories, because 2x2 is a standard size. 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters is a little bit less of a standard size, so you might have a little bit harder of a time finding attachments to go onto this in the future. But with that being said, you have quite a bit of attachments included right in the package. So maybe you don't ever want to add any accessories in the future, because you've got your dip handles, which I'm going to take off now that I've shown them to you and get them out of the way. Then you have your cable itself. You have single handles. You have a lat pull down handle. You have this teeny tiny handle here, which, to be honest, I don't even know why this is in the package. It's basically useless because of how narrow it is. If I bring my hands in here to the center of the handle, you can see how much narrower than shoulder width that is. That is a very unnatural position to be holding a bar. And if I'm gonna be doing push downs, I'm just gonna use the lat pull down handle anyway. What I would have rather seen them do is to just not include this at all, and instead take the money that it costs to manufacture this little handle that I'm never used once and never will use, and put that money onto maybe having a knurled lat pull down handle versus a smooth powder coated one with plastic handles on the end. Now with that said, there's not necessarily anything wrong with a lat pull down handle. It feels good enough, it gets the job done, and cable attachments are a standard thing. So you can add whatever cable handles you want in the future anyway. If you want to upgrade your lat pull down handle, great. If you want to add new handles that you don't have, great. That's the great thing about the cable attachments. And then we have a landmine handle. So this goes on your barbell for when you attach it to your landmine. So you can do your rows, you can do your underhand rows, you could flip it around, you could do some presses with this thing. So it's a nice little touch that it come with a landmine handle as well. And then as we work our way backwards and talk about the rack itself, there's a lot of things that I really like about this rack for the price point that it's at. The powder coat actually feels pretty high quality in comparison to some of the other racks I've seen in this category. Is it as good as something like Rogue? No. Is it pretty good? Yes. And then we have lots of holes, which is another thing that I've mentioned in my RitFit review that I wasn't as happy about, was how far the spacing was. There are a lot of holes, so you're gonna have a really easy time finding exactly where you wanna put the J-cups for your various exercises. And then as we step inside the rack, one of the things that I really like about this rack is there are laser cut holes every 5 numbers. So it's gonna be a little bit easier to locate exactly where you want to put the J-cups again. And on the sides over here, there's actually numbering for every single hole for your cable. And with the multi-grip pull-up bar, this is one of the better pull-up bars that I've seen for racks at this price point. And it does have that nice angled grip that you can use. This part isn't knurled, which is a little bit disappointing because that's one of my most common grips, is to grab right there on the slanted part for a pronated pull-up. But all of the inside holes are knurled. It's a pretty passive knurl, but it's good enough for pull-ups. So you have a wide neutral grip, a narrow neutral grip, and then you have a 45-degree grip. So plenty of options when it comes to pull-ups. And then when we make it back here to the back, we have our actual cable trolley. And one thing that I do really like about this one specifically is that it's 12 inches on each side of loadable space, which is a lot and allows you to put more weight on the weight horns, of course, versus some of the other options out there. And is a particularly good thing if you are using bumper plates, because bumper plates are wider, meaning you can't put as many plates on there. So having that extra, 2, 3, 4 inches, depending on which one you're comparing it against, is actually a really big deal. One thing that I will say is one of the end cap broke off basically immediately, and I don't even know where it's at this point, but I didn't bother looking for it because it didn't really serve much of a purpose anyway, and I don't necessarily mind that it's gone. And then as we look up to the top here, we have another feature that is not very common for racks at this price point. We actually have little hooks so that you can hang handles on, different accessories on. If you want to take your single handles off, put your lat pull down bar on there, you can hang these up here, or you could hang your pull-up bar up here, or whatever you want to hang up, you can put those on the back of the rack. And that's actually a pretty cool feature that, just from a quick scroll, this was the first one that I saw that actually had that feature. And then a couple of other small notes on accessories as well. We have a couple of weight horns that can stick wherever you want on the rack. They're removable. And then you have your band pegs. And one thing that I like about this one is there are holes all the way throughout the base here. So you can pick exactly where you want your band pegs to go. That's a really cool touch there. And then you have internal safeties. So they do intend for you to squat and bench and do all of your exercises inside the uprights. And that's important to note because some only come with half rack spotters, which really says that the company intends you to do your exercises off the front of the rack. And I'm not saying there's one way that's right or wrong. It's just something to be aware of when you're purchasing a rack. Do you intend to squat inside the rack and bench inside the rack and do everything inside the rack? Or do you intend to treat it like a half rack and do things off the front of the rack? And that should be something that you consider when making a purchase, to look at, okay, well, what safeties does it come with? And then another thing back here, we have off of one side a weight tree. It has a front arm, a back arm, and then it has a little vertical bar to where you can do vertical bar storage. It's kind of up to personal preference. I kind of would like to have seen something a little bit more similar to what the RipFit has over here, to where they just have one arm coming off of one side, one arm coming off of the other side, and then that way you have weight stored on each side versus the way they have it stored here, because that also requires you to have just a tiny bit more clearance as well, because you have to bring it forward enough that you can actually load plates onto that back weight horn there. With that being said, you could actually just leave that off. That part bolts on. If you really wanted to, you could leave that part off and then not use that storage, and then you could just take the two removable weight horns, put them on each side, and then only use that for weight storage. So that is an option, but like I said, it's just a small thing that I would like to have seen just a little bit different. Now, if we give it a little bit of a shake for a stability test, you can see there is some wiggle there, but it's actually surprisingly stable for being a budget rack and being a 2x2, or in this case, a 3 centimeter by 3 centimeter rack. And one question that you're probably wondering is how smooth the cables are. And I'm pleased to announce that they're actually pretty good. And that's about the extent of it. Of course, we're talking about a $700 budget rack that also is a cable combo. So we're not talking about a multi-$1,000 functional trainer that's purpose built, but for the price point, I feel pretty good about it. I can say that I have used dedicated functional trainers that were not as smooth as this. So that's something to keep in mind. The only negative thing that I will say about the cables is on a couple of exercises, particularly flies, where I was using both handles independently, I could feel a small degree of like transfer of force. If I started struggling, I could feel the cables pulling against each other. And that was kind of a minor thing, and I think that has more to do with the fact of it's two handles attached to a single weight stack versus two handles with two independent weight stacks. So I think it's more of a issue of the type of machine itself versus this specific machine, but I did want to make note of that. And there are a couple of other negative things about this rack as well. One thing is the foot plate here at the bottom being like a fixed foot plate, which honestly seems to be kind of the standard for most of the racks in this price category. I would have rather have seen it be removable, like with the RitFit rack, so that it's not in the way when you're not using it. And then kind of the same thing with the Landmine, which is not as big of a deal with the Landmine because you can kind of flip it back and lay it over to the side. So it's not really in the way as much, but this can be a little bit in the way depending on your foot placement if you're benching inside the rack. And I know that's a lot of ifs for it to be in the way, but it can be in the way, so I wanted to make note of it. And another negative is disappointingly something that I thought was going to be a positive. I was actually really excited about the way this little trolley was set up, but it turned out it didn't really work in practice the way that it's supposed to in theory. So if you look over here, you'll see we have this handle coming up right here, and kind of the idea there is so that you can grab the handle, you can pop the pin, and then you can adjust this one-handed. And that works fine when you're going down, but when you're pushing up, it wants to twist a little bit, and it's actually really hard to adjust one-handed. Like, I'm actually pushing it pretty hard right now. And so you actually do need both hands putting even pressure to make it easily and freely slide up and down this upright. And probably the biggest negative when it comes to this rack is actually the plastic, or I don't even know for sure if this is plastic. I wonder if it's a type of rubber, almost, it feels like. Just from using my bar a few times, you can see some scratches on the J-cups here. So if you have a bar with really aggressive knurling, which might not be many of you out there, if you're using a rack like this, you might also have more of a budget barbell that has really passive knurling, in which case it probably isn't an issue. But if you're like me and you have very aggressive knurling on a barbell, I would see these things probably getting chewed up a little bit over time, or a lot over time. But other than that, I'm thoroughly impressed by this rack. I think you're getting a lot of bang for your buck here. I think the quality of the rack is there. There are a few drawbacks, as I've mentioned, but overall, this is a solid rack. If you purchase this rack, I think you're gonna be happy with it. Now, with that said, I am gonna put this rack head to head with the RitFit rack in the next video. So make sure to stick around for that and see which of those two comes out on top. And again, if you want to see this become a series where I compare some budget racks head to head, let me know in the comments and I'll keep this series going. As always, God bless you and your family, and we'll see you next week. And then you have